Hello, this is LP, and today I'm not playing a video game. Well, I probably am, but not here right now. I'm ranking some The Legend of Zelda Top 5. The Legend of Zelda. Few video game franchises have ever been able to aspire to reach the depths of success that the Legend of Zelda franchise has. Fewer still will have come close to approaching it at all. Now, the Legend of Zelda series is one of the most historically successful. This video game franchise is widely regarded as the penultimate fantasy adventure. Fans of the franchise and the series love it so due to the gameplay, the story, the music, and yes, the characters as well.
Hey, listen!
Now, providing a ranking of the series in any capacity is largely considered impossible due to the overwhelming success that almost every single title has enjoyed. And selecting a top 5 from the wealth of great Zelda titles out there is all but impossible as well. So with that said, here's my top 5 Legend of Zelda games. Where's the AV to HDMI converter? Gosh darn it. Coming in at number 5, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Now, this is the most recent Zelda title that I have played, so there may be a bit of recency bias here. This game came out in 2011 on the Nintendo Wii. It was also since released on the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version that I myself played. I really enjoyed this game. The story, the artwork, the characters, as mentioned, the music, of course, all fantastic, just like any other Zelda game. This game was designed with the motion controls in mind, and as such, it translates a little differently to the Switch. And of course, there are still motion controls you can play with on the Switch. That said, it's just easier to use the analog stick. Not exactly common for Zelda games, but not all that difficult to get used to either. This game followed in the traditional Zelda pattern of saving Princess Zelda. Link must fight his way through various dungeons, eliminating several enemies, some enemies several times, before he is able to travel back and forth through time and save the princess. The game is not without flaws, of course, and some of the enemies are downright annoying. But on the whole, it was a very, 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 very good and very entertaining Zelda game. Now, if I had to think of something negative for the game, I would be hard-pressed to list the controls, at least for the Switch, but as mentioned, not that difficult to get used to. However, the game itself felt kind of short. You fight the avocado monster 12 or 13 times, and by the end of that, well, that's the game. I did really enjoy the time aspect inside Lanayru Desert. Thought that was really, really cool. And then the Kikwis. How could you do anything but love them? And for all her faults and unrelenting advice, I was actually a fan of Fi. I liked her. I liked her a lot as a character. She was almost somewhat self-aware, it seemed, at points. Like, she knew how ridiculous she was being. How over the top with her statistical analysis. And I suppose I can relate to that because here I am being over the top in my own analysis of Zelda games. That doesn't make me annoying, does it? Does it? Number 4. Regarded, honestly, as the largest Zelda game ever created and arguably the best pure video game on this list, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, many will give me flack for putting this here at number 4, and maybe deservedly so. It is a masterpiece of a game, well made from top to bottom. The only caveat that I have with saying that is that they did not include Koji Kondo. This had been the first Zelda game without the great composer, and honestly, I felt it. I understand that the creators were going for more ambient, chill, so to speak, music, and to that point, they succeeded. But Koji Kondo is almost synonymous with works of Legend of Zelda, and to have a title without his work is a little bit disappointing. That's not to say this was not a great Zelda game. The hours that I put into Breath of the Wild were easily the most hours I've put into any single one Legend of Zelda game. I took it upon myself to find all of the Koroks, to complete all of the shrines, to obtain all of the weapons, armor, and the upgrades for them. And that's one of my favorite parts about Breath of the Wild. The whole upgrading component. They took what they had established in Skyward Sword and made it better. The ability to take your weapons, your clothing, your armor, what have you, and tier it based on the amount of resources you accumulated and then taken them to the Great Fairy was an awesome game mechanic. I really enjoyed that. That is something that I've always personally wanted inside a Legend of Zelda game, and getting that opportunity was really exciting. Unfortunately, Nintendo gave that opportunity and took away what was already my favorite part of the Zelda franchise, and that was the dungeons. Now, the shrines are somewhat dungeon-like on their own. They're just smaller, more compact, more linear, and honestly, a little less challenging. Again, not to say I didn't enjoy each and every one of them, and obtaining all of them was a blast. But being the size roughly 12 times that of Twilight Princess, there's a lot that can be done in this game. And while they did not fall short of expectations, rather they exceeded them, there are still some areas I would like to see changed. And with Breath of the Wild 2 on our horizon, I am eager to see what lies in wait there. Now, this next game might rile some people up even more than my ranking of Breath of the Wild at number 4, as this game is sometimes regarded as the best video game of all time. Coming in at number 3, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Now, I want to preface this here saying that these next 3 games, Ocarina of Time included, are all so close together in overall ranking in my heart that they are largely interchangeable. 1, 2, and 3, if this is a 100-point scale, are all sitting within a 1/10 of a point from one another. We're talking 99.5, 99.6, 99.07210. What does that mean? I don't know, but they're all very close together in overall ranking, enjoyability, and playability. Now, Ocarina of Time was the first Legend of Zelda game that I myself ever owned. It was also, of course, naturally, the first Legend of Zelda game that I ever beat. And now I understand that this is probably, well, very relatable to you yourself watching this, and that makes it something of a nostalgia trip. And while I believe that nostalgia does have an impact on my placement of the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time here on my top 5, it is not the sole factor. The game itself, especially for the time that it came out, is beautiful. The replayability is honestly great. I'm not going to get into the current Nintendo Switch Online mess, but if you have an N64 and you're able to boot that up, or if you have Master Quest for the GameCube or something along those lines, this game still holds up to this day. The characters are engaging, the story paced very well. The dungeons, the dungeons. I mentioned how in Breath of the Wild that there were not enough dungeons for my liking. Well, Ocarina of Time is the standard to which I hold it too. The dungeons in Ocarina of Time have captured my emotions for the greater part of the last 20 years. And if I had to pick a single one that had the most long-lasting impression on me, it would definitely be the Shadow Temple. Who could forget the creatures lying in there, just waiting to terrify your 8-year-old mind? I still have nightmares about dead hands. And if we're speaking about nightmares, we're speaking about darkness in the Legend of Zelda franchise. Well, where would we be without mentioning Majora's Mask? Coming in at number 2, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask was the direct sequel to the Ocarina of Time. We follow Link as he is searching for Navi, the fairy, through the Lost Woods before coming across Skull Kid, who then, well, you've played the game. You know what happened. The game itself is extraordinarily dark. There are very adult undertones in almost every conversation you have with every NPC in the game. And as a 9-year-old child playing this for the first time, I failed really to grasp the gravity of several of the conflicts that many of the characters were themselves wrestling with. It wasn't until years later, upon replaying it several times, that I began to understand the context. I began to understand the dread that everyone in the game was feeling. For one reason or another, it still ended up being a very enjoyable game, and that, I feel, is largely due to, again, the dungeon design, the story pacing, and the new twists that are the masks. I myself was a massive fan of the masks and the powers that they held, and getting the Fierce Deities mask was honestly probably my proudest Zelda accomplishment. Back in a mystical age before the conveniences of the internet and message boards and Reddit and what have you, I purchased a strategy guide. And this guide guided me to getting all of the masks and Fierce Deities mask and really just having a great time. And that left a really long-lasting impression on me. It took me a little bit to get used to the concept of moving back and forth through time, and to start out with, I was really confused getting on each day, not necessarily understanding what would remain, what of my progress was actually concrete, what had been established and remained, and what I had to redo. There was a portion of the early days of my playing this where I thought I would have to beat the entire game in the 3-day span, and you just got as many tries as you needed. Thankfully, I soon realized that you actually retain the key items and accomplishments that you had achieved. And all of this while running on the same Ocarina of Time engine and utilizing many of the exact same assets from that game made an extraordinarily different game. It was almost something of a nightmare of Ocarina of Time. And while it didn't enjoy the commercial success I feel that it deserved, it did in fact get re-released on the 3DS, and that game is, well, and I don't think Majora's Mask ever truly got the appreciation that it deserved. I mean, just look at this, it's a gold cartridge. I love gold! The look of it, the taste of it, the texture. Before we get to number 1, let's talk honorable mentions. Twilight Princess. This game was probably my most anticipated Zelda game. It was the first Zelda game that I ever waited outside of GameStop at 2 o'clock in the morning for. In the freezing cold in the middle of December, this game largely met expectations. It was a very good Zelda game, as all Zelda games ultimately are for the most part. I, myself, just did not particularly enjoy the Link to Wolf Link hopping around. That gameplay mechanic, while innovative, neat, and interesting, was not as fun as, say, throwing on the Goron mask and catching sick air over a log in the middle of Termina Field. Interestingly enough, and maybe related, Twilight Princess is the one Zelda game that I can't find. I own it. Where is it? I don't know. Honorable mention number 2, the entirety of the 2D Zelda game collection. Now, you might find it odd that I have segmented that entire faction of the franchise off to the side, and to a certain extent, you're probably right, but my reasoning here is that I have such a strong connection with the 3D Zelda games. That's not to say the 2D ones are bad. I owned and played all of them as well. I love each one of them individually for what they are, but when I am ranking a top 5 Zelda games, I am only thinking of the 3D ones. The 2D ones, while excelling in their playability, their story, and their puzzles particularly, the experience on the whole for me just pales in comparison to the 3D titles. Is this wrong? Is this right? I don't know. You tell me, and hey, maybe I'll do a top 5 of only the 2D titles. And here we are, number 1, The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. Now, when The Wind Waker came out, there was something of a shock, at least in my own circles, as we had been expecting Twilight Princess. Back in 2000, there was footage of a more darker or adult-looking Zelda game. There was Link fighting what looked to be Ganondorf, and everyone was pretty jazzed about that. And then BAM! Cell shading! The graphics that threw everyone off ultimately being one of the major selling points and distinct characteristics of the game we all know and love today. The Wind Waker's cell-shaded graphics were very cartoony, very colorful, very in your face, and at this point in time, beautiful. I didn't know so at the time, but they're beautiful. The gameplay quickly stole my heart, and the pigs. The pigs. Oh, the pigs. Have you played with the pigs? You can play with the pigs. You can hit the pigs. You can throw the pigs in the water. The sailing element that Wind Waker introduced was a massive change to what I had grown to expect from the Legend of Zelda franchise. Gone, obviously, were the days of trekking through the highlands of Hyrule, and replaced were the great depths of the Great Sea. Riding the King of Red Lions, Link sought out to investigate many different islands, and this exploratory factor was excellent for replay value. There was this feeling of always having something to discover, always having something to find, always having something to do. And can we talk about the music? Like, come on, listen to this. Oh, that's a banger. Oh, ooh, that's a banger, dude. Oh, that's a banger. And there you have it. That is my top 5 Legend of Zelda games. Now, I feel, son of a bitch. Now, many of you are going to disagree with the order of my top 5 and even the games included therein. There is a reason for that. So please, feel free, tell me in the comments where you agree and where you disagree. Where am I on the money and where am I just so off base that it's absurd? Please, tell me. I'd love to hear your reasoning. So, with all that said, maybe I'll do more of this. Maybe I'll go back to making Let's Plays. Maybe I'll return to the vlog. Who knows? This was kind of a random spur-of-the-moment video. I'm thankful you were here. Maybe I'll see you again next time.